Welcome to this deep dive. We're going to be talking about mimetic desire. It's this idea that maybe what we want is actually influenced by other people even more than we think.
Yeah, it's kind of like this invisible force, pulling us towards what other people want.
And for this deep dive, we're using Luke Burgis's book, Wanting, The Power of Mimetic Desire in Everyday Life. So we're going to try to figure out how this works, how it shows up, in our regular lives.
Yeah, and then how knowing about this can actually help you make better choices, more fulfilling life, you
Yeah,
know.
exactly. And this starts with kind of a fascinating observation. So Burgess talks about research by Dr. Andrew Meltzoff, and it shows that even babies are really good at recognizing desire in other people. So like imagine a mother looking at something really intently,
Yeah,
and her baby, like even without understanding language or anything, the baby will focus on that same object.
it's crazy, right? It's like we're just hardwired for that, to see what other people want.
So how much of what we want as adults is actually from other people? Burgess gives this example. You're at a bar, you're thinking about getting a beer,
Okay.
but then your friend orders a gin martini, and suddenly you're like, ooh, a martini sounds pretty good, and you order one too.
See, that's mimetic desire right there, but you don't even realize it's happening.
Oh, yeah, I've definitely felt that before, like wanting a new phone because my coworker got one, or, even like wanting to upgrade my car after seeing my neighbor's new car.
To understand it better, Burgess breaks it down into two categories, Celebristan and Freshmanistan.
Celebristan and Freshmanistan. Okay.
Okay.
So Celebristan, I think that's where we're influenced by people that we don't really interact with directly, like celebrities or CEOs or, historical figures. We admire them. Maybe we even try to be like them, but we're not really in direct competition.
Right. Like if you admire Elon Musk and you want to do something big in tech, that's Celebristan.
Okay. So then Freshmanistan, that's our peers, our friends, colleagues, people that we are actually kind of competing with. The stakes are higher there, right? Because
Yeah.
you're all going for the same things.
Exactly. Think about the difference between like being inspired by Elon Musk's success
Yeah.
and then feeling jealous of like a coworker who got promoted instead of you.
Yeah, that's a big difference for sure. And it seems like social media has kind of blurred the lines between those two worlds. You're constantly seeing these perfect lives of other people, celebrities, people you went to high school with, whatever. So it's like this constant competition, even with people that maybe used to feel far away from your life.
Yeah, social media is powerful. It really can make that mimetic desire way stronger because now you feel like you're comparing yourself to just so many more people because it's harder to know what you really want.
It's like this never-ending highlight reel, and it makes you question everything, like what you should want, what you should be doing. But Burgess doesn't say that all mimetic desire is bad. He has this story about Ferruccio Lamborghini and Enzo Ferrari, and it shows how mimetic desire can be this really powerful force for good, for innovation.
Okay, so we've seen how mimetic desire is like this powerful force, right? Shaping what we want. But what do we do with that? How do we deal with it and actually make good choices about what we want?
That's the big question, right? Like, how do we actually use it for good? Make it work for us, not against us.
Yeah.
Burgess gives us a few tools to help us do that.
Okay, I'm ready for the tools. Let's hear it.
First thing is something he calls naming your models. Basically, you have to figure out what or who is influencing you.
So it's not just knowing that it's happening, but actually figuring out who specifically, the
Yeah.
people or like the things that are influencing our wants.
Exactly. So think about it. Who are the people in your life whose opinions matter to you?
Mhm.
Whose lifestyles do you maybe look at and think, oh, I want that?
What about like social media accounts you're always checking, comparing yourself to?
Yeah, it could be anyone, right? Like friends or family, people at work, or those perfect Instagram feeds.
It's about becoming like a detective of your own desires,
Hmm.
tracing it back, asking yourself, why do I want this? Is it really something I value or am I just copying someone else?
I can see how just being aware of that could be huge.
Once you know who those models are, maybe leading you down the wrong path, Burgess says you got to create some distance.
So does that mean like unfollowing everyone on social media, avoiding people in my life?
Not necessarily. It's more about setting boundaries. Maybe you mute some accounts that make you feel bad or just be more careful about what conversations you get into.
It's about choosing who you let influence you.
Exactly. Create that space to figure out what you actually want.
That makes sense. Okay, this next one really stood out to me when I was reading the book. Establishing a hierarchy of values.
That's such a good one. Helps you make decisions that match up with what actually matters to you.
Yeah.
It's about knowing those core values that guide your life.
Yeah, like what are your principles? What do you stand for?
Right.
Hmm.
And then rank them. Put them in order of importance. And then when you have to make a choice, you can ask yourself, does this choice fit in with my top values?
Oh, that's really good, especially nowadays, right? There's so much pressure to do things a certain way, have a certain lifestyle. It's easy to lose sight of what really matters.
Exactly. It's about taking back control,
Yeah.
making choices that feel true to you, not just reacting to what other people want.
Okay, love these. Now let's talk about seeking out thick desires.
Oh.
That one was a little confusing to me at
It's
first.
like a fancy way of talking about desires that really connect with your values and make you feel fulfilled.
Okay.
It's the opposite of thin desires.
Yeah.
Those are the ones that come and go really fast and are usually influenced by outside stuff like what's trendy or what other people have.
So how do you find those thick desires?
It takes time. Looking inward, experimenting, maybe getting out of your comfort zone.
So you can't just sit around and wait for them to show up.
Right. You got to put in the effort.
Yeah.
Burgis talks about how he found his thick desire for writing by doing this 30-day writing challenge. That's how he found this passion that's still with him today.
So pay attention to things that make you feel excited, things you enjoy doing so much you forget about time.
Yeah, those are good clues.
And you said earlier that thick desires are connected to our values. Can you give an example?
Sure. Let's say you really value connection and community. Maybe you find that volunteering or really focusing on building relationships with people fills you up.
So those desires that come from your values stick around. They're not just going to disappear when something new comes along.
Now, Burgess doesn't just talk about individuals. He looks at how desire works in groups and organizations, too. He talks about cycle 1 and cycle 2.
Oh yeah, cycle 1 and cycle 2, I remember those. I'd love to hear more about that.
Think of cycle 1 as like the bad cycle of desire. Lots of competition, people feeling like things are scarce, and lots of conflict. Like imagine a workplace where everyone is fighting for the same promotion.
Yeah, that doesn't sound healthy. It creates a toxic environment for sure.
Exactly. It's like a downward spiral. Everyone gets more anxious and insecure. Cycle 2, though, that's the good one. It's about abundance, working together, and focusing on shared goals.
So instead of fighting over a tiny piece of pie, everyone tries to make the pie bigger.
Exactly. Like a team where everyone is working towards the same thing,
Yeah.
and they see individual success as part of the whole team's success.
Sounds like a much better place to work.
And Burgess says leaders have a really important role in shaping these cycles.
So if a leader encourages competition and makes people feel like there's not enough to go around, that's going to create a cycle 1 situation.
Right. But if a leader focuses on collaboration and makes people feel like there's plenty for everyone that can lead to cycle 2,
This is making me think about how I approach my own work and relationships. It's not just about me, it's about how everyone interacts.
and Burgess talks about this thing called the scapegoat mechanism. It's about how these group dynamics can go really wrong.
Yeah, that one was a bit disturbing, but I think it's important to understand.
It's something that's happened throughout history. When a society or a group is going through something bad, they often look for someone to blame.
Like a target for all that negative energy.
And this scapegoat, whether it's a person, a group, or even an idea, it becomes the focus of all the blame.
It's easier to blame someone else than to look at ourselves.
It might feel good for a little bit, but it doesn't actually solve the problem.
Just a distraction.
And it can have really bad consequences. Injustice, persecution, even violence.
So we need to watch out for that in ourselves and in the groups we're part of.
Right. If we understand how scapegoating works, we can stop blaming other people and work on finding real solutions.
Okay, so here's a big question. If that scapegoat thing doesn't work as well as it used to, and the market economy isn't fixing the problems of mimetic desire, what's the answer?
Big question indeed. Burgess calls it the search for a third invention, something that can help us deal with mimetic desire in the 21st century. He doesn't have a clear answer, but he gives us a few possibilities.
Okay, I'm curious, what are those? What are some ideas that could help us have a better relationship with desire?
One thing he talks about is designing technology more thoughtfully. We know social media can make mimetic desire worse, but what if we made technology that helped people connect better?
Yeah, instead of just making us compare ourselves to each other and feel bad.
Another idea is building what he calls thick institutions.
I remember that term. Can you remind me what that means?
Think about organizations and communities that give people a sense of belonging and focus on shared values and working for the common good.
Like churches or maybe businesses that are really ethical?
Exactly. Those can help us resist those individualistic, materialistic values that are so common.
So it's about connecting with something bigger than ourselves.
And in the end, it comes down to each of us changing from the inside.
So even though we need to change systems, we also need to work on ourselves.
Yeah, we need to be self-aware, understand how mimetic desire is affecting us, and develop habits that help us connect with our truest values and what we really want in life.
That's powerful. We're not just controlled by our desires, we can actually shape them.
Burgis gives a great example of someone who did just that. Chef Sebastian Bra. Have you heard of him?
Yeah, he's that chef who gave back his Michelin stars, right?
Yep. He was at the top of the culinary world, but he felt trapped in this cycle of mimetic desire. He was always trying to please the Michelin inspectors instead of following his own heart.
Like he climbed the mountain and realized he didn't like the view.
And he was brave enough to walk away from that and define success for himself.
It shows you don't have to follow those external markers of success. You can decide what success means for you.
And it starts with understanding what's going on, seeing what's not working for you, and having the courage to do something different. That actually leads perfectly into the last part of our deep dive, ready to explore what the future of desire might look like.
Absolutely. Let's hear what Burgess has to say about how mimetic desire will shape the world in the years to come. We've talked a lot about how mimetic desire affects what we want and how to use it for good. But as we finish up, I'm wondering, where does all of this go? What's the future of mimetic desire?
Yeah, that's a tough question. But Burgess does give us some ideas about how it might play out in this century. He says we're already in a time where mimetic desire is really intense, mostly because of the internet and social media.
It does feel that way. We see all these pictures and stories about other people's lives, their achievements, their stuff, and it's easy to start comparing yourself and forget what really matters.
Yeah, it's like we're all in this giant room of mirrors reflecting each other's desires back and forth. And that can lead to what he calls the collapse of desire, where we're fixated on those thin desires, those wants that don't really matter, and are just about getting validation from others.
I get that. When you're always comparing yourself to everyone else, it's hard to figure out what you actually want versus what you're just copying from someone else.
And chasing those thin desires can cause problems beyond just feeling unhappy. It can make us buy more stuff, hurt the environment, and even lead to social unrest.
So it's not just a personal thing, it affects the whole world.
But even with all that, there's some hope. Burgess thinks we can make a future where mimetic desire is used for good.
Okay, good. Need to hear some good news. What are some ideas for making our relationship with desire healthier? For ourselves and for everyone.
Well, we already talked about it too, like being more careful about how we design technology. Instead of making platforms that make us compare ourselves and keep us glued to our phones, we could make technology that helps people connect in a real way.
We don't have to be controlled by technology, we can control it.
Another idea is building those thick institutions we talked about.
Yeah, those groups and organizations that give people a sense of purpose and shared values.
Right. And in the end, it all comes down to each of us changing from the inside out.
So we need to change systems, but we also need to work on ourselves.
We have to be aware of what's influencing our desires and make choices that match up with our values.
So we're not just letting desire happen to us, we're choosing what we desire.
Exactly. Burgess uses this chef as an example. Sebastian Bros, you know him.
Oh yeah, he's the one who gave back his Michelin stars.
Yeah. He was at the top, but he felt like he was trapped in this game of mimetic desire, always trying to impress those Michelin people instead of cooking what he wanted.
Like he got to the top and didn't like what he saw.
And he was brave enough to quit and define success his own way.
He shows us that we can decide what success means for ourselves.
And it starts by understanding how desire works, seeing what's not working for you, and being brave enough to do something different. This whole conversation has really made me think differently about myself and the things I want. Mimetic desire is definitely a real thing, but it's encouraging to know that we can control it. We can make a future where desire leads to a better world.
Me too. This has been eye-opening. I feel like I understand myself better now and the things that influence my choices. The challenges are real, but I feel hopeful. We can make a difference. We can create a future where desire brings people together and leads to good things.
And I think it starts with each of us taking charge of our own desires and making choices that come from our truest selves.
That's a great takeaway. This deep dive has given us a lot to think about. Anything else for our listeners before we wrap up?
I just think about what really stood out to you in this conversation about mimetic desire. Maybe there's something you want to try, or maybe you just understand yourself a little better now. Whatever it is, use it to make good choices about what you want in life.
So what resonated with you? What will you do differently? These are good questions to ask yourself as you go about your life. And until next time, keep diving deep.